This is not the story of Ilkley Moor. Instead, we are in that liminal space of return and similarity, where an image seems to reappear in another landscape. One of our viewers reached out to us with his own, unconfirmed experience, an account he says has never been told before. You might have seen this photo. The heavy mist was beginning to clear in the early morning light. Across the path, a small figure darted out from behind a rock. The figure in that image is roughly human-shaped, but not human. The body is short and compact, around 5 feet tall. The shoulders are broad, the torso narrow, the head large and smooth, as if encased in a helmet. The limbs are thick and heavy, and the arms hang too low, almost to the knees. It appears to be standing or moving across a slope, its outline blurred by mist and grain. The story goes that sometime in the 1980s, a former policeman named Philip Spencer went out onto Ilkley Moor with his camera, hoping to capture the strange lights that had been reported there. What he hadn't expected was a chance encounter with what he later believed to be an alien. He managed to take a single photograph before the figure ran off into the mist. Spencer gave chase. Moments later, he saw a craft lifting from the fog and vanishing into the sky. The photograph remains, blurred and uncertain. A squat, human-shaped being with a large head, heavy arms and short legs, caught in movement across the slope. Years later, and far to the north, another man would see what he believed was the same kind of creature. One day in 2025, Stories Lost received an email from a man in Sweden named Fredrik. He described himself as an atheist, not someone drawn to the unexplained. He added, "It is very strange for me how people can believe in, for example, an afterlife without being totally certain." Now what then followed was an account of an encounter that, according to Fredrik, has stayed with him ever since. Our viewers sometimes write to us. Some ask about the cases we cover. Others send their own accounts, events they say have never been taken seriously, or that never found a place to be heard. We are making this episode to acknowledge those of you who engage with the channel, the ones who write to us, share your own letters, and leave testimonies in the comments. Many of you have asked us to take some of that high weirdness and translate it into our format. This is our response, a nod to those who live and think at the fringe, open to the impossibility of something strangely possible. It all unfolded around the turn of the millennium, in Norway, at Spiterstulen in the Jotunheimen mountains. The valley there, Visdalen, lies high above the tree line where pine gives way to stone and moss. Streams run across the valley floor, carrying silt from the glaciers above. The slopes are scattered with old farm ruins, reminders of a life that once reached farther into the mountains. At the turn of the millennium, Fredrik was in his early 20s and living in Sweden. He traveled with his parents to Norway, to Spiterstulen in the Jotunheimen mountains. They had stayed there before. At this time of year, the gates to the mountain road had only just opened, and patches of snow still clung to the slopes. The valley was quiet, the tourist station still empty, and for several days they saw no one else. They were alone in the valley. Or so they thought. Their family party had eaten lunch on a hilltop. Afterward, Fredrik told his parents he wanted to walk a little farther into the valley. He said he felt a kind of pull, a sensation that made him want to explore deeper into Visdalen. He wrote to us in English. We've kept close to his words but adapted the account so it can be followed as a continuous story. It was midday, and the sun was at its highest point of the year and day. In midsummer, it is a very bright place, especially on a clear, sunny midday in the mountains. Very easy to see even the smallest details. We just had lunch with my parents at a hilltop. I felt a sensation. I needed to go a bit deeper in the valley and discover it. So I told my parents I would go a little farther, and that I would be back in a while. My parents understood me, and I began my ascent along the ridge that led me deeper inside Visdalen. It was windy in the valley that led outside, so if an animal was there, it would have been hard for it to detect my human scent. I arrived at my destination because there was too much snow to continue, and the bridge that led above the river was totally broken off from the snow and hanging in the air. So I decided to head back to my parents again. But after walking for about a few minutes, I suddenly felt an extremely strong feeling of being watched. It came as information outside the brain, and was something I only felt one time before, but this was even stronger. I ignored it as my mind played tricks on me, so I just continued for some 100 meters down the mountainside. But the sensation did not go away. It was something behind the hill beside me I felt. As it was extra work for me to climb up this way and to go back, it was something I preferred not to do. But the sensation was so strong, it became impossible to ignore. I had to see what was behind the hill, so I decided to make the effort. After a while, I reached the top of this relatively small hill. Of course, I did not expect to see anything, as I was a non-believer of supernatural phenomena. My opinion was that only crazy people see strange things. In the worst case, I could expect to see an animal, if by some feeling or information I knew it was there. My brain got a very strange reaction. Then I stood face to face with direct eye contact with a thing that should not be there. It had no visible nose, only a narrow slit where the mouth should be, and what looked like undeveloped ears pressed flat against the head. I was still shocked by what I saw, standing watching me for about 45 minutes, for little more than 20 meters away from me, on the riverbank canyon top, on the other side of the small, strong, narrow spring river, even if it was almost the middle of the summer. I was relatively calm as it felt like protection, but I feared it could maybe fly, which it later proved it could. It was vibrating and looked exactly as this photo I years later saw on the internet from the Ilkley Moor incident. Somehow I heard my name Fredrik from a metallic-like voice in my head.
Fredrik?
Later it used this channel to communicate with me. The only difference to Ilkley Moor was that this being had some form of mask, like a mountain fox, and a bad form of fur cover at the torso. It only covered a small part of the body. The real skin between was gray, even green, you can say blue even. I was shocked, and it communicated with me to not be afraid. It reminded me of the strange, super bright hologram I had seen 2 years earlier in my grandparents' home after Christmas, and of the dreams and experiences that came with it. Our dog was often alert then, barking and staring at something I couldn't see, until one night I saw 5 bright lights. Maybe it was spirits. When they disappeared, the dog stopped barking. In one of those dreams, I met 3 aliens who spoke to me and introduced themselves as Ihu. They were about 9 feet tall and wore space clothes, but in a modern way, not like moonwalking suits. In the dream, we used pendulums to ask them questions about everything imaginable. I sometimes use that method in real life still. For example, once I dreamed of a creature sitting beside my bed in broad daylight, the sun coming through the window. It was just before lunch on a weekend, and I thought if I opened my eyes it would disappear. But it didn't. It turned small and thin and left a smell like burnt paper. My mother asked what I was doing because there had been a bang and a rumble. She and my father later saw them too, sometimes also strange flying objects outside, and even before I was born. I had dreamed that they chose a home for me, and I saw our house from above. My parents told me later about a huge bright star above their house before my expected birth. But this is only context around the creature in the mountains. It was the same being in every detail, but material this time. I have had other experiences as well, but it will be too much here. This is about the mountain incident. My first reaction was, there stands an alien. Within some seconds, no, it is totally impossible. It must be something else. A child in a masquerade suit, or a genetic failure in a fox, as it had no tail and only 2 legs and 2 very long arms, one a bit longer than the other it looked like, hands like shovels and noticeably huge. It seemed surprised to see me and froze after about half a minute, moving very little. I shouted to it that I will not leave before it. For the whole time, the incident lasted about 45 minutes, and I kept checking that I was awake. I scraped myself with sharp branches and thorns until it came blood and it hurt very much. I closed my eyes to see if it had disappeared, which I very much believed it would, but it was still there. I repeated the same things again and again during those 45 minutes, and it did not disappear. It was still standing, watching me. I even made plans to try to catch it and bring it down to the mountain station at Spiterstulen, but I realized very fast that it was a bad idea. It would not be good for many reasons. I poured water on my face, turned my body into the wind, shook my head, turned around in every direction, even hit my head many times, but it did not disappear. It was at the same place. Behind the creature stood an enormous boulder, larger than anything else on that side of the river. Later, when I looked at aerial photographs of the area, I could not find it. Maybe the photos were poor, but I began to think it was not a rock at all, but something hidden in plain sight, a craft made to look like part of the mountain. The later part of the incident was the most frightening. I wondered how long we would stand there, both waiting for the other to move first. Then suddenly, it rose straight up without making any sound. It turned in the air, and I saw my deepest fear confirmed, that it was truly a humanoid being. There was no reaction in nature, no flashes, no sound, nothing strange. Everything stayed completely still, as if nothing had happened. The figure drifted toward the boulder, which was as large as a small house. For a moment, I thought it would fly directly into it, even though that seemed impossible. Instead, it passed behind the boulder and disappeared from sight, moving almost like a person would. I stayed there for about 15 minutes more, afraid but curious, waiting to see if it would return. I wanted to see if it would come back, if there was a spaceship behind the boulder, or if something else would happen. But nothing did, except for a sudden rainstorm that came out of a clear blue sky. Without warning, it turned dark, and strong gusts of wind shook the underbrush, the grass, and the trees. I had to run the 5 miles back to the Spiterstulen station. I looked back several times to see if I could spot a UFO, but there was nothing, only dark clouds. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the strange weather passed. The sky cleared and it was sunny again. It was before the time of real cell phone cameras, so I could not take any photos, not to mention video. I also think most of what appears online today is fake. I had not expected to see anything like this in my lifetime, so I had not even brought a camera. It was left in my parents' backpack. Looking back, I still do not know what it was. I know what it looked like, what it did, how it behaved, but not what it was. Children in suits do not fly. The mountains were completely empty that day. We were the first to arrive after the gate reopened for the season. Maybe it was not expecting anyone to come up from behind the hill. It seemed surprised, almost caught off guard, as if it had sensed me before it saw me. It felt, somehow, like it wanted me to see it. Afterward, I had a slight headache that lasted for 3 days. I kept thinking about the connection between this event and the hologram-like image I had seen years earlier. In what I thought were dreams, I had contact with beings that looked the same, and the experiences felt just as real. Those dreams later turned out to be true in every detail of my life, something I could not have believed at the time. They showed things that happened years later, who I would marry, how many children I would have, even their gender. My father is a physicist, and sometimes I wonder what he would make of it. Not long ago, my family and I went back to the same place. Again, the weather changed in an instant. Heavy rain started without warning, and we had to turn back. Just before it began, there was a strange electric feeling in the air and the start of another headache. There was no thunder, so it could not have been that. Maybe it was only a shift in pressure, but it felt the same as before. For a long time, I doubted everything I had seen, but that changed one night. Outside my window, a huge bright light hovered silently in the sky. Beside it was a smaller one, reddish in color. Then both shot away at incredible speed, as if to show how fast they could move. A few years later, they came back and did the same thing. There was no time to reach for a phone. When I ran to wake my wife, they were gone. Such things move too fast. I sometimes think that what people call ghosts might be the same kind of phenomenon. Orbs, lights, things that seem alive but are not. It feels more like technology than anything supernatural, something beyond what we can explain, but still physical, still real. Maybe they exist in another dimension, made of the same matter as us, and it is our minds that need to learn to accept them. Sometimes I even sit with my phone beside me if they were to come back. He ends his letter to Stories Lost. My kindest regards, Fredrik. And as always, we come away with a few loose ends, a few conclusions. After all these episodes, and after all the years gleaning the stories of the unexplained, we know that we treasure the reflective moments that we share on this topic. The connection that grows out of the conversations that take shape around our episodes when someone recognizes a detail or remembers something similar and decides to share it. From time to time, we come across encounters that sit just beyond what can be named or verified. They come from people who find themselves alone with an experience that does not fit, who return to the moment again and again, trying to see it more clearly. These are not police reports or scientific cases. They are the remainder, the spillover, what stays uncollected. Each of them catches a fragment of light from the unknown, a trace of how the world looked in that instant when the ordinary failed to hold. That is the ground on which Stories Lost moves, the small accounts that press at the limits of what can be seen, remembered, or believed. We honor their stories, but as always, we'll let you be the judge. Thanks for the coffee and supers. And thanks to our members and Patreons. You're the best. See you next week.